A quiet failure inside America's weapons pipeline is now spilling into the open. As Ukraine waits for critical artillery, Washington is turning its fire inward at its own defense contractors. Delayed shipments, missed deadlines, and mounting pressure have exposed cracks in the system. For the Pentagon, frustration has reached a breaking point. In an unprecedented move, U.S. officials are taking rare, decisive action to fix the flow of weapons. The battlefield waits, but the bottleneck has already made its mark. The United States is preparing to fine its own defense contractors for failing to deliver artillery ammunition to Ukraine on time, a rare and telling move as the war grinds on. According to Bloomberg, the U.S. Army is seeking penalties from Northrop Grumman and Global Military Products after critical ammunition shipments arrived months, even years late. This isn't just about paperwork or missed deadlines. Artillery shells are the backbone of Ukraine's battlefield strategy. Delays of this scale don't just disrupt logistics, they reshape combat realities on the ground. Bloomberg reports that some ammunition deliveries were delayed by as much as 18 months. That's a lifetime in a war defined by attrition, where supply speed often determines survival. The U.S. Army now says it will enforce contractual penalties, compensation expected to reach at least $1.1 million, though the final amount is still being assessed. Officials say the message is clear. Wartime contracts are not optional promises. In a statement, the Army emphasized that it is actively monitoring performance, documenting failures, and applying penalties where contractors fall short. Translation: the Pentagon is done waiting. Northrop Grumman has confirmed the Army's action. The timing is critical. Washington has poured tens of billions of dollars into arming Ukraine, while urging allies to accelerate their own military aid. Any bottleneck, especially from within the U.S. defense industry, threatens that entire strategy. Just months earlier, in August 2025, the U.S. State Department approved a $104 million deal to supply Ukraine with equipment and repair services for M777 howitzers. That contract named UK-based BAE Systems as the main contractor, underscoring how global the supply chain has become. But global supply chains also mean global delays, and Washington appears increasingly unwilling to tolerate them. The Pentagon wants accountability, not excuses. This development also intersects with politics at the very top. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has revealed a new deadline tied to efforts to end the war, a timeline set by U.S. President Donald Trump himself.
Huge, explosive, unthinkable, until now. After nearly 4 years of bloodshed, fire, and shattered cities, the Russia-Ukraine war may finally have an end date. This summer, June. According to the Associated Press, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky revealed this new deadline to set up an agreement to end the war. The deadline was set by none other than the U.S. President Donald Trump. He is the same Trump who had claimed to end the war within 24 hours of election. During his presidential campaign, Trump had boasted about his ability and friendship with Russian President Vladimir Putin. But now, he has been in the Oval Office for more than a year, and the Russia-Ukraine war is only intensifying as Putin forces continue to hammer the war-torn nation. But what if both Russia and Ukraine do not agree to end the war? Zelensky has the answer. Zelensky told reporters that the U.S. administration will likely put more pressure on both sides to meet it. Earlier, Reuters, citing 3 sources familiar with the matter, reported that the U.S. and Ukrainian negotiators have discussed an ambitious March goal for Russia and Ukraine to agree on a peace deal. Under the framework being discussed by U.S. negotiating team led by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner and Ukrainian negotiators, that any deal would be submitted to a referendum by Ukrainian voters. The source said that U.S. negotiators have said Trump is likely to focus more on domestic affairs as the November congressional midterms approach, meaning top U.S. officials will have less time and political capital to spend on sealing a peace accord. Meanwhile, the second round of U.S. brokered talks concluded on Thursday in Abu Dhabi. It produced no breakthrough other than the release of 314 prisoners of war and a commitment to resume discussions soon. Zelensky said the U.S. proposed holding the next round of trilateral talks next week in their country, likely in Miami. He confirmed Kyiv's presence.
For tomorrow, I have scheduled a meeting with our delegation. Our guys are returning to Ukraine. Late tonight, tomorrow, there will be reports on those sensitive aspects of the Abu Dhabi negotiations that cannot be discussed over the phone. We are getting ready for the next round of trilateral meetings. And tomorrow, we will also be holding discussions with our European partners. Currently, our parliamentary diplomacy is active in America, led by the Speaker of Parliament, Ruslan Stefanchuk. We had a detailed discussion with him before the trip about what was most needed. This specifically concerns the support for our state, for our people. The Air Force of the Armed Forces, there will be personnel changes there currently in some regions within units concerning defense against Russian Shaheds. The small air defense component, specifically for countering attack drones, must operate much more effectively and prevent the problems we are currently facing. In some areas, our defense lines are better established, but in other directions, we still need to work, and work significantly harder.
The talks are over, the handshakes are done, but the war in Ukraine is not. After 2 days of high-stakes negotiations in Abu Dhabi, Russia, Ukraine, and the United States leave the table without a breakthrough. No ceasefire, no territorial deal, no clear end in sight. What did emerge is a rare point of convergence between Washington and Moscow. For the first time since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the world's two largest nuclear powers have agreed to resume high-level military-to-military contacts, a major shift after years of frozen channels, severed dialogue, and rising risk of miscalculation. The talks produced a prisoner exchange, more than 300 detainees set to return home, the first such swap in 4 months. But beyond that humanitarian step, progress stalled. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called the discussions complicated and warned that time is running out. He said, "We want faster results." Even the U.S. mediator admitted the road ahead remains long, difficult, and uncertain.
Today I briefed Donald on the situation in our country, focusing primarily on the energy sector. This particular issue is now one of the priorities for the restoration of our energy system. A lot is being done to preserve
a normal life for people after the brutal Russian terror. Every day, in fact, Russians are trying to deprive Ukrainians, our cities, our villages, of any possibility to live, to exist in the conditions of such a cold winter.
The alarm is sounding right now. This indicates that Togeko, no agreement has been reached regarding the end of the war. I think that's quite clear to all of us. There is an exchange today. I congratulate these families who will soon reunite with their loved ones and relatives at home. That's very good. 157 Ukrainian soldiers will return home.
As for the nature of the conversation and the topics that were covered, they discussed a wide range of subjects. They are of the opinion that the information is extremely sensitive. They wish to come here and provide me with a detailed report. After that, I will be able to communicate with you, having a clear understanding of our current position.
It is important that this process is moving forward, and we are hoping for much faster results. And if there is a next meeting, it means there's a real chance for the dialogue to continue, which I certainly hope will lead to an end to the war.
As diplomats talked, missiles still flew. In Kyiv, entire districts were left without heating in sub-zero temperatures after Russian strikes crippled energy infrastructure. More than 1,000 apartment blocks could remain without heat for weeks, possibly months. And at the heart of the deadlock lies territory. Moscow is demanding that Ukraine withdraw from large parts of the Donbass and that land seized during the invasion be internationally recognized as Russian. Kyiv has rejected those demands outright, warning that ceding territory would only invite future aggression. Russia currently occupies around 20% of Ukraine. Ukraine still holds key areas Moscow insists it must abandon. Neither side is backing down. But from Moscow, the message is sharp and defiant. In a blunt interview with RT, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused Europe of trying to sabotage emerging talks between Russia and the United States. Lavrov dismissed reports of Western security guarantees for Ukraine as an ultimatum, warning such plans would only rearm Kyiv under the cover of a ceasefire. He rejected accusations that Russia initiated attacks on civilian infrastructure, insisting Ukraine struck first, and claimed Moscow had previously honored a temporary energy ceasefire proposed by President Trump. Lavrov also took aim at Europe's broader stance, accusing EU leaders of trapping themselves politically. On the one hand, he said, they portray Russia as weakened, exhausted, and failing. On the other, they warn voters that Russia is about to attack Europe. According to Lavrov, that contradiction exposes what he called fear-driven politics and a lack of imagination.
Exactly on the very eve of these events, and not just in any random place, but right there in England, specifically on the British Isles, within the pages of the Financial Times newspaper, a certain report suddenly appears, claiming that everything is finished, and the Russians will now be presented with a formal ultimatum in the form of a document that is practically an ultimatum with security guarantees for Ukraine that have already been agreed upon. And security guarantees mean that if Russia should suddenly dare to attack Ukraine once again, or if we, the clever ones, orchestrate some kind of provocation which, under a false flag, would allow us to accuse Russia, then immediately, within 24 hours, we would condemn and give Ukraine carte blanche for the continuation of the war. Within 48 hours, we're gathering all those who are willing to fight, and in 72 hours, the United States will be joining us. This is completely absurd. But this nonsense is extremely, extremely telling. What does it truly mean? That everyone, because for the entire last year, the West has only been saying, Europe has only been saying one thing. We need reliable security guarantees for an immediate ceasefire and security guarantees. We have asked about this many times, but if we proceed without first resolving the fundamental issues of a political settlement, then these security guarantees will essentially mean that a temporary ceasefire will be used as a convenient pretext for pumping Ukraine with even more advanced and lethal weaponry. This logic, they simply didn't hear it, they didn't react to it at all. But under the current circumstances, you see the Trump administration, when they began to deal with the Ukrainian. By the way, what the Trump administration is doing regarding the Russian Federation is perceived quite ambiguously here. We have some romantics and people prone to illusions, but I can say a few words about that later. Now, about Ukraine, the Trump administration really decided to address the conflict's causes. Now, when it comes to all of these recent calls for a ceasefire or a truce, you are well aware that right now they have started a massive wave of public hysteria over the claim that we are acting in an inhumane manner by cutting off the electricity to entire cities, that innocent people are suffering and freezing in their homes, and that Russia is deliberately striking at various critical energy infrastructure facilities across the entire country. They are making these accusations against us right now. We never initiated these actions. It was the Ukrainians who first began to strike at energy infrastructure and other civilian targets, including residential buildings, stores, and hospitals. A year ago, a passenger train was blown up without any military For some reason, they tend to forget when they speak about Russia. The examples of our goodwill are numerous. When in March, I believe, of last year, President Trump, in his conversation with President Putin, proposed declaring an energy truce for a month. And President Putin publicly supported this proposal on that very same day. And for an entire month, that was March and April, we did not touch Ukraine's energy facilities at all. And as for Zelensky, during this very same period of time, well, I don't have the precise number in my memory right now, but they have definitely attacked our entire energy infrastructure more than 130 times, specifically targeting civilian objects. Therefore, our conscience is completely clear on this matter. And our patience is it is not limitless. I don't see Europe taking any position. They've fallen into their own trap. They've taken an uncompromising stance, returning to what I started with, Russia's strategic defeat. Ukraine simply cannot be allowed to lose. Russia cannot by any means be allowed to win. Otherwise, the entire continent of Europe will lose all credibility. And everything that they are doing right now is to completely derail those negotiations that seem to have been tentatively planned between us and the Americans, and to which Ukrainian representatives are now being added. But let's just consider the arguments that we are hearing from the Europeans. Russia has become weaker. Russia is barely managing to make any real progress across the Ukrainian territory. Russia is seizing only a tiny teaspoon of this land with every single passing day that goes by. Russia is achieving nothing. It's the 5th year of the war, and so on and so forth and so on. They're suffering enormous losses. Russia is compelled to do this, compelled to overcome its lagging behind in many types of weaponry, as they claim. And by vividly portraying to their constituents such a picture of Russia weak in military terms and weak in economic terms, they immediately, without any kind of buffer or intermediary step, build a bridge to the idea that therefore we must prepare for the fact that it will attack us. But if you're going to portray us so vividly, as a country that's both militarily and economically weakened, then at least show some imagination to present your arguments to your voters a little more elegantly.
As the trilateral talks close, one truth stands unchallenged. Dialogue has resumed, contacts have reopened, but the guns have not fallen silent. The war grinds on, and for now, peace remains just out of reach.